Greetings again, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. Being a Dark Lord of the Sith comes with certain stipulations. One must represent the ideals of the Sith, embracing passion by shirking any amount of love or compassion left within them. And the Dark Lord Sidious certainly exceeded this expectation for his role. There is more oxygen in outer space than there is love in Palpatine's heart, something he has proven time and time again with all of his sinister deeds. In particular though, how he treats those around him. Anyone who is not immediately useful to him gets tossed aside or destroyed, sometimes even if they are incredibly useful, but they pose a challenge or a threat to him at all, he'll destroy them anyway. Palpatine has been through several apprentices to prove this fact, and what's more is that he often won't even grant the mercy of death to certain rivals such as Maul, whose life he totally razed to ground, but still let him live so that he could wallow in his ultimate failure. Though perhaps there were few more cruel and abusive than his apprentice, Darth Vader. And yet, our researchers here at the archives have come across a few sources to suggest that Vader may have been the only being that Palpatine actually cared about to some extent. In this holocron, we are going to discuss a little speculation of ours that we've deduced from several factors. That maybe, just maybe, Darth Sidious had somewhat of a soft spot for Vader, so let's go ahead and dive in and explain why. Before we begin though, I started up a brand new channel for another one of my passions, that is, horror projects. On the Horrendous Wave you'll find breakdowns of various demons from media, such as Pazuzu from The Exorcist and Lamashtu from The Exorcist Believer, as well as cryptids, the story of the Death Angels from A Quiet Place, and just today we posted a brand new video about the true shark attacks that inspired Jaws. So if you're interested in any of that, the link to the Horrendous Wave will be in the description down below. But anyway, let's get back into the topic at hand. When speaking of Sidious, it's worth going ahead and getting the obvious out of the way. Sidious definitely only ever cared for Anakin because of his power, and very little else. He is still a Sith, and the destruction of the Jedi Order, and the corruption of the Chosen One to add insult to injury was always the goal. Palpatine only ever chose his apprentices because of their power and potential in the Force. The moment he found someone better, he would toss them aside. Both Maul and Dooku are known to have exceptional talent and skill within the realms of the dark side, potential that in certain scenarios could have grown to rival even Sidious himself. But this was never good enough for the Dark Lord. So long as someone stronger existed, he would only want that person to be a part of the Sith legacy. Using context clues, we know that originally Sidious wanted Vader to succeed him as the Dark Lord. In Revenge of the Sith, he outwardly says to Yoda, "Soon, Darth Vader will be more powerful than either of us." Of course, we have speculated before that Sidious's real plan all along was to get Vader to a point where he was extremely powerful in the dark side, and Sidious would use essence transfer to take over his body and become the ultimate being as the god of the universe. But we digress. Anakin's power in the Force was what Sidious lusted after, and he would stop at nothing to have that power for himself and for the cause of the Sith. He would play the long game and watch Anakin grow from boyhood to adulthood, garnering a close friendship with him along the way. Of course, their relationship would take a sudden, cruel turn after Anakin's failure on Mustafar. But this is where it gets truly interesting, and our first piece of evidence comes in. In the novels, we learn that Sidious reminisces about the moment when he saw Anakin as a limbless, burnt husk crawling along the black sand beach. Obviously, his first inclination is to just leave Anakin there to die. Anakin had failed in his mission and was unable to kill his much weaker former master. By all accounts, Sidious should have just followed the way of the Sith and punished Anakin for his own personal weakness, allowing him to die a very slow and a painful death. However, he did not. Instead, Sidious put everything he had into Vader's rescue. Let's look at the facts here real quick. Sidious had won. Order 66 had been a smashing success, and by this point, there were no Jedi left to pose a threat. The Senate had already accepted the reorganization of the Republic into the Galactic Empire. Sidious had just fought and humiliated his rival. He had corrupted the Chosen One, and now he believed their little prophecy about balance and destruction of the Sith was at an end. When he saw Anakin lying there, he very well could have just left him. In fact, by this point, Vader had outlived his usefulness in Palpatine's short-term plan. Sidious could even sense that due to Anakin burning and the loss of his limbs, his ability to touch the Force was diminished, and his potential was brought down drastically. With all of that said, we can see why Sidious would have normally just left Anakin to die and rot away on the shore of Mustafar. Sidious believed Vader deserved to die, and he no longer needed him since he had been spoiled, gone rotten, lost his potential. And yet, unlike Maul or Dooku, Anakin had punched a hole through the blackness of Palpatine's soul. In the Revenge of the Sith novelization, he knelt down to his now crippled apprentice's side, and as the book reads, set his will upon Vader. He willed Anakin to live. The dark side has a couple of interesting abilities in the realm of prolonged death, and it was likely one of these esoteric powers that Sidious was using on Vader on this moment. The whole ride back to Coruscant, Sidious did nothing but continually doing what he could to ensure Vader lived. The novel describes him making use of all kinds of potions and indulging in dark rituals, anything to save Anakin. When they finally reach Coruscant, Sidious is focused for several days on repairing Vader. We know he uses sorcery as well as alchemy to ensure Vader lives, but of course, Sidious is still extremely furious that Anakin lost. Because of this, famously, he makes his suit painful and limited, forcing his apprentice to live in agony. Finally though, Vader did live. He is a shadow of his former self, filled with rage and anguish, but he is alive, and Sidious did not care. The important thing is that Vader lives, and from this point on we know that the Emperor is especially cruel to him. But through all the comics and novels, there is one constant. Sidious is doing things behind the scenes away from Vader's knowledge. For the first time, Sidious actually was invested in the journey of an apprentice, and by invested, we meant that Palpatine would go out of his way to secretly set up tests, quests, and various challenges for Vader. Something that's been pointed out is that the Emperor never actually trains Vader personally in the dark side. He provides Vader with study material and gives him missions, but that's the extent of pure training. Vader's training in the dark side came from the various lessons that Sidious imparts on him, either through a quick word of advice or an especially grievous task that he commands Vader to carry out. But the point is, he was always trying to help Vader grow in his powers. For several years after the events of Mustafar, Sidious does what he can to get Vader to move beyond his grudge against Kenobi and the death of his wife, even helping him move beyond the obsession with Jedi. Vader was a lost cause, but Sidious still tried anyway, although his trials came often in the form of challenges that brought Vader to the very edge of his mortality. Dozens of assassination requests and secret enemies put in Vader's path can all but trace to Sidious's own machinations. While running the Empire and setting up projects, Sidious still found the time to scheme up lessons and challenges for Darth Vader. But beyond all of this, the advice that Sidious tries time and time to impart upon Vader shows his care for Vader's own personal growth, something that Sidious did not show with his other two apprentices. Despite the fact that Anakin rejects most of these lessons, Sidious still tries. He teaches his apprentice to hold his hatred inside of himself to grow his power, rather than wasting it on killing subordinates. He teaches Vader to let go of petty grudges and look to the bigger picture that's more becoming of a Dark Lord. Sidious encourages Vader to let Padme go, to forget Obi-Wan, because all of this trauma from Anakin is holding Vader back. Sidious does everything in his power to kill Anakin Skywalker and let Vader live. For nearly 2 decades, Sidious would try to help Vader with this, and essentially would grow to despise him because Vader refused to learn. This is why, when Luke finally presented himself, Sidious was quick to attempt to throw Vader aside. But still it remains clear, Palpatine handles Vader with a care that he does not handle with anybody else. So in conclusion, what measure did Sidious actually care for Vader, and why? Well, we can say that this emotion does not stem from love whatsoever. It barely has anything to do with even fondness. But there's just something about Vader that Sidious wants to see improve. Palpatine wants better for this apprentice, and what's more, he desires for Vader to want better for himself. In The Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, we learn that Vader's self-pity actually disgusts Palpatine. The literal Dark Lord of the Sith has to threaten his apprentice within an inch of his life to be more optimistic. It's an ironic, but real truth about Sidious's opinion on Anakin. But the real question here is why? Why go through all this trouble in Vader's power if he is now only barely what Anakin could have become? The answer lies in the fact that the potential for Vader to grow back to his full strength was always there. Sidious says himself that the limitations of Vader are not physical, but mental and emotional. A true Sith does not need their body to be powerful in the Force, and that is the lesson that he is trying to impart on his apprentice. In truth, Palpatine sees a lot of himself in Anakin. Both of them were immensely powerful beings in the Force that were treated like monsters for their natural power. Palpatine's own father told him that he hated him since he was a baby and wanted to kill him his entire life. Palpatine's family hated him because they thought of him as some evil creature, which of course he was. Because of this, they lavished him in gifts and privileges in order to attempt to pacify him. Palpatine, though, never viewed this as being pacified. He viewed it as being imprisoned. Palpatine could kill people, and his family was so afraid of him that they would get him off scot-free with their connections and wealth. Palpatine never learned consequences for his actions and had no compassion or remorse of any kind. By watching his father, he learned one thing to be true, that wealth and power was enough. It was only once he met Darth Plagueis did Palpatine ever realize that anyone could care or appreciate him. Yet, Palpatine would soon learn that Plagueis never actually cared for him as a person, but only to watch his power grow. The fledgling Sidious would learn this lesson well. The first person to actually care for him only wanted his talent because it was the only thing to him that mattered. This was the only type of affection he was ever shown, so it became the only thing that he decided to judge others for. If you were powerful, useful, talented, or skilled, you would receive Palpatine's affection for a time until your use ran out. For Vader, though, that usefulness was always there, and because Anakin grew up much the same way Palpatine did, shirked by everyone around him because of his power and talent, Sidious more or less identified with him as a person and wanted to be for Vader what Plagueis was to a young Palpatine. He desired to teach him this lesson and what it means to value yourself for your power and do everything you can to cultivate it in the best way possible. And this was the final truth of it all, the real reason why Palpatine held somewhat of a soft spot for Lord Vader and Anakin. Not love, but it is clear that he cared for him as a kindred spirit. But anyway, friends, what do you think of this character study? Do you agree with us, or do you believe that Sidious just truly was as heartless as we think? Again, this is not to say that Sidious cared in any meaningful way, but to just say that he cared somewhat. Thank you as always so much for watching the channel today, my friends. May the Force be with you, and I hope you're having a great one.